Welcome to our defense today for Prospectus for Father George Gobrail. Congratulating on reaching this point in his research. We've had many exchanges between the beginning of the year, and now we're reaching this very high point, so we can move out into the field. Before we begin, let's just pause for a word of prayer. Father in heaven, we thank you that you are just that. You are our Father who is in heaven. We are on earth. We recognize your attributes that claim you as all that we know you to be in our lives, in the world in which we live. We pray that as we deliberate again today, that you will superintend our minds, our words, and our actions. Thank you that Father George has reached this point in his research. We pray that as he proceeds, that he will find the experience one of learning a skill that can be very useful in future ministry. We ask these things in your name. Amen. We are first going to have Father George present what he wants to in the way of an overview of what he is doing, and then we will proceed from there to have round-robin discussions of the plans that he has.
I'm glad to be here, first of all, and I really appreciate all the effort from Dr. Sherman and Dr. Huber, and I'm glad to meet you.
Raise your voice a little bit.
I'll try. And actually, just I want to give background about what my research is about, and talking about the Coptic Church in diaspora, or Coptic Church in particular in United States, because the Coptic Church spread all over the world, but my study, my research is in United States. How the church started here, it started in 1960s, and it was few families getting to know each other in work or marketplace or in the mall or wherever they meet Egyptian people. They start to recognize that there are a community, maybe 3, 4, 5 families together, and exchanging visitations. They start to have Bible study. They start to ask to have a priest to come once a month to pray for them, and from there the community started to be formed, to think about being a church, a Coptic church. And the church in Egypt, the headquarters, always providing priest per generation, or the bishop representing the Pope here, but this happened later. It happened in, I would say, 1990. 1985, that we do have a bishop representing the Pope, but before that, it was a direct contact with the church in Egypt to send first generation priests to serve new community, new Coptic church going to establish. And over time, the church established. Now we see that in the beginning of Bob Shenouda, who started in 1971, it was 40 churches, in 2 in the United States and 2 in Canada. When he died, it was about 200 churches in the United States itself. So we see how fast the church grows in 40 years, from 2 churches to 100 times to 200 churches. That's very fast growth for new church. It all happened, this is the first important point, it all happened with the first generation community. All these 200 churches started with first generation community. And this will take us to talk about the members of the Coptic Church. So the Coptic Church has grown in the United States. Yes, it started with the first generation, but it didn't end as of 2019 now with only first generation. We do have people started to immigrate in 1960s and so on, and go on after that. So we do have second generation, third generations in some families of those who immigrated too early. And seeing a second and third generation, those who were born and raised here, they start to look for a partner, a spouse, not from Egyptian community, because the Egyptian community, small community, they don't find a spouse or partner, so they start to have non-Egyptian spouse. And as the church grows, we see that there are other people interested in Orthodoxy or the history of the Coptic Church. They want to join the Coptic Church. That's why we'll see that in any current local Coptic church now, we'll see two main subgroups. We have the Egyptian Coptic group and we have the American Coptic group. The Egyptian Coptic group, it's yes, one group, but among them we can see professional people that they immigrated early, and still now there are some coming for studying or for a career. But later in 1988, as the diversity visa lottery started, 5,000 Egyptian comes every year that they were chosen randomly. So they are educated, not educated, whatever they are chosen randomly. Most of them high school diploma. So we do have among the Egyptian Coptic group the professional and the non-professional first generation Egyptian. The American Coptic group, they are Egyptian American, the second generation, the third generation coming from parents who are third generation, and the American spouse, those who join the Coptic Church because of the Egyptian spouse or American Egyptian spouse, Egyptian American spouse insist that the spouse has to be Coptic. It's a very strong tradition in the Coptic Church that it's a shame if the second generation or the first generation leaves the Coptic Church to join another church for a spouse. It's a very strong tradition that the spouse joins the Coptic Church. The American spouse joins the Coptic Church, not the Egyptian joins the American spouse church. So we'll find good percentage now in any local Coptic church from the first generation and second generation mainly, who are married to non-Egyptian American spouse. And convert Copts started lately, I would say, with the beginning of the 21st century, that the church started to be aware to reach out for other people, not only to close for the Egyptian community. And this from where we got the converted Copts. Some people, they join the church because they research for all the church, apostolic church, is something that started thousands of years ago, like the Coptic church started with St. Mark at the second half of the first century. So we see these converted Copts started, they are not many, but they are starting to join the Coptic church. The three categories together is under one subgroup is American Copt subgroup. They are under one subgroup because they have things in common. And these things in common is the problem of the research. The research is going to investigate the heritage, culture, religious practice from the lens of cultural dimension theory of Hofstede. So to do that, we have the Egyptian Americans who have problem with some of the heritage, culture, religious practice. The same problem for American spouse who has no idea about the Coptic church. For the converted Copts, they come to the faith more than the practices. So they like to be secured with the church start 2,000 years ago, as the time of the apostles. Most of the people who are converted Copts I've met, they always talk about the faith, that it's secured from the time of the apostle of Jesus until now. This is how they look at the Coptic church. But they still have the problem of traditional or heritage, cultural, religious practice. they have the same. So the three categories have the same problem about heritage, culture, religious practice. As I said, that I'm going to investigate heritage, culture, religious practice through the lens of half-state culture dimension series. It has 6 dimensions. They are here in the slides in order different than what I have in the paper, but they are related as you see. It doesn't matter which one is number 1, which one number 4. So I have indulgence versus restraint, and these talk about the freedom and the good life of persons that he can live and serve others. And through this dimension, I'm going to investigate cultural religious practices. I'm not going to just looking from a social standpoint. I'm going to look from cultural religious practices in the Coptic Church. And when I say culture, I don't mean social culture. I mean more, it's a religious culture. It's something that the Coptic Church adopted from Egypt, from the culture there in Egypt, and implanted in the church. So it becomes a part of the practicing in the church. So that's why always the word culture connected with the word religious in my research, because I'm not talking about social culture. I'm talking about religious culture more, something that practicing in the church. So I'm giving an example for restraint here, indulgence versus restraint, talking about the Coptic Church, that it has long days of fasting, almost 2/3 of the year. It has long time of prayers, 7 times a day. It has many asceticism practicing in to help the congregation to grow up spiritually. It's very acceptable and enjoyable to the first generation, but are they the same to the second generation American spouse or converted Coptic? This was the research going to figure out that how this asceticism, spiritual life that the Coptic Church presented to its congregation, how the American Coptic group enjoyed and lived with it and eager to practicing more and more, or they avoid it and try to be marginalized or away from getting involved in all this practicing. This was the research about. The same about long-term, short-term. Short-term is about people that they always having their present supported by the past, by the ancient time. And the Coptic Church as Coptic Orthodox Church, the early fathers and the desert fathers' writings are very sacred writing in the church, and they are the foundation for many things happening in the church now, and it is the teaching of the church. Like if I want to write a commentary in Book of Matthew, if I'm not having reference from the ancient father in my commentary, it will not be acceptable to the Copts, the first generation Copts, because always see that I am standing on a solid ground when I go back to what the early father says. It's not my own thoughts, my own writing. So always the Coptic Church leaning to a shorter orientation more than long-term orientation, looking forward and planning for forward, having contemporary commentators that have their interpretation not based on the ancient. It's something not easy to accept in the church. Masculinity, femininity, we see that the Coptic Church is a masculine church. We cannot deny this. All the clergy who are the leaders in the church, they are men. It's not negotiable in the Coptic Church. There is no room for a woman to be a pastor or a priest in the Coptic Church. Not only that, but the Coptic Church, against any teaching from other denominations that they do have women as a pastor. They try recently to get the woman involved in the church, like to be representing for the woman group as one woman be in the church board, but not in everything that the woman can handle in the church. Beside other restriction about the woman body nature, that the church stopped her from getting communion a certain time in her daily life. So through these 6 dimensions, I am seeing the culture, religious practicing, and how they are accepted by the first generation who are Egyptian Copts subgroup and the American Copts subgroup who contain Egyptian American, American spouse, and converted Coptic. And see what is the dimensions score after having the questionnaire. I'm going to have a questionnaire. Yes, this will take me to the point that how I'm going to make this research. I'm going to have a mixed method design for this research. Why? Because first of all, as I researched as much as I can, I didn't find any research that has statistic data about the 6 dimensions of Hofstede in the Coptic Church. There are others in other denominations, but not in the Coptic Church, either in American or other than American. So it's important to me to see the 6 dimensions from the perspective of American Copt subgroup and the Egyptian Copt subgroup who lives in the United States. And it might be surprising me to see that even the first generation Egyptian lives in the United States will have different perspectives than Egyptian lives in Egypt, because they've been here for many years. So I'm not sure they will have the same mindset for the culture, religious practices, or some shifts happen through years living here. Also, in my mind background is 2 factors are really important, is the religious identity and the ethnic identity. The religious identity is what the first generation or the Egyptian Copt subgroup loves to be identified. Let me give you an example. If I give them a choice to be titled Arab or to be titled Egyptian, you will choose Egyptian, not Arab. If you like to be titled Egyptian or Copt, you will choose Copt. It will end up as the end is that he's seeing himself or she's seeing herself is that I am Coptic member in the Coptic Church. Regardless, I live in Egypt or I live in the United States or Germany or wherever I live, it doesn't matter. But I am Coptic. This is how they are proud. Proud of the history, proud of keeping the faith through the persecutions that happened through many years in different times of history. The church still survived. So you can see this pride in any Coptic member, first generation, that I am Coptic, belonging to a church that survived through all the persecution happened to the church. And because also of the persecution, they stick together. So the religious identity is very important to the Egyptian Copt subgroup. While the American Copt subgroup who lives here, if they ask you, are you Coptic or American? I'm American. They take it from other perspectives, the ethnic identity, not the religious identity. If you ask any Egyptian lives here for so many years, has a citizenship, he has children, grandchildren, he still say, I'm Coptic. Or so he's practicing his life here, but still the religious identity for first group is above the ethnic identity, while the American Copt subgroup, the ethnic identity is above the religious identity. And if I ask one of the categories of the American subgroup, they will say I'm Christian. It's not that important to him to see himself a Coptic. I'm Christian, I believe in Christ. This is how they see themselves. They are not sticking and holding fast to the identity as Coptic. So how I'm going to have my research? I will have my research with sequential explanatory mixed method design. Sequential because in process, I will have the questionnaire first, then I will have the interview. But in data analysis and writing out the data I got, it will be integrated together. I cannot separate the data from the questionnaire from the data from interview. They will be integrated together. But they are sequential in process. Explanatory because I will have the questionnaire that will identify or form the Coptic Church through the 6 dimensions from the Egyptian Cop subgroup perspective and from the American Cop subgroup perspective. And for example, if I got from the statistical data that the Coptic Church is high in PowerPoint, what does it mean to me? And Hafstad, in his theory, he didn't say that being high or being low is something good or bad. It's just this who you are. So it doesn't matter. So, but it matters to me if the power distance is high in the Coptic Church, and it is titled high by the Egyptian Cop subgroup and the American subgroup. What important to me is to get their explanation from their life experience. They love it, they enjoy it, they prefer it, then it's not a problem. So we can see anything related from cultural, religious practices that going through PowerPoints, it's not a problem in the Coptic Church with the American Cop subgroup. So having the interviews will explain the data of the questionnaire, which will help me to get to the point, present it to the Coptic leaders and say, hey, you have 6 dimensions. There are 4 dimensions that are very critical and really very concerned from the American Cop subgroup. And there is a dimension that even the Egyptian Cop subgroup also concerns this dimension. And you have to look at this and digging more to see what you can do or what exactly in this dimension that led people to leave the church silently from the American Cop subgroup. Yeah, because another point is a cultural point. The Egyptians, they speak loudly and they don't let it go peacefully. So if I have a problem in the church, I speak and I speak loudly. So people will know that I have a problem or I am frustrated or I'm upset with what's happening in the church. On the other side, we see the American Cop subgroup disappeared. And nobody knows why. They just leave the church. They leave the church. They don't say why. So we have the problem that the silent exodus, as we say about it now, is that there is silent exodus happening from American Cop subgroup. So we need to see through the 6 dimensions, analyzing or investigating the cultural religious practices, what are in these practices that affect or getting the American Cop subgroup to be marginalized or to leave silently from the church. So the design will be informed consent in SurveyMonkey, and they have to click agree. And I have 3 options for the informed consent form. I agree and complete the questionnaire. I agree, complete the questionnaire and willing to be interviewed. And I add my email. I say, please email the researcher at this email. And the third option is I disagree to the informed consent condition. So he, once he clicks this and try to click next, it will take him to disqualify the pages and he will leave the SurveyMonkey. He doesn't have the access to the questionnaire. So he has to have the access to the questionnaire. He needs to click agree and complete the questionnaire, or agree, complete the questionnaire, and willing to be interviewed. So the first is to agree to the informed consent form. Second is to complete the questionnaire. Third step is those who will email me with their interest to be interviewed. I will send them some criteria that I'm looking for in Egyptian, Coptic group, American Egyptian, American spouse, converted Coptic, and also some other criteria like, do you live in such and such states, or where do you live? Because I'm going to have a face-to-face interview. So there are some locations I can be there, and through this location I can meet people. Like I live in Maryland, but I travel to Kentucky, so I can have people in Maryland, Virginia, Delaware, this area. They are reasonable driving distance. Or having in Kentucky or Nashville, Tennessee, it's a reasonable driving distance. Most of the time I have a layover in Charlotte, North Carolina, so I can have a night in Charlotte and meet people in North and South Carolina who can drive there. So I will give them options for some states so that I can meet them there face-to-face in the local church in this state. So this will be included in the email I will send it for those who are interested to be interviewed. Who will reply back with fulfilling all the criteria and live in one of these states? I will call him to explain what the interview will be about it, and set a time for the interview. And I will email him what was what we have said over the phone together, just a reminder and summarize for the conversation. Then the interviews, of course, will be recorded, and I will take the recording and transcribe it through the GMR, and then the audio and the transcript together will be in Mascada. Sync it together, the audio and the transcript. So whatever in the audio, it is written right away and transcript to help it to follow the two. I will give them codes, which is some words related to the main points in the interview answers. Then I will have a theme. The theme will be mainly will be the 6 dimensions. So under this will help me to integrate the data, because I will have each dimension score from the questionnaire statistical data. Having this score with what is related from the interview answer under one theme, say masculinity, for example. Under masculinity, I will have all the codes that are related to these dimensions with the score for this dimension from the 2 subgroups. I can integrate the data and see how the interviews explain this direction or give insight to what is the meaning of the score I got from the questionnaire. Then this is how I will integrate the data. The integration will be having one theme, getting the 2 data together, and integrate them in when I have chapter 4. Analyzing and collecting the data.
Okay, thank you. Good job. Explanation.
Thanks.
As we move into the period of time in which we will do kind of a round-robin discussion, I'd like to mention that we have spent, as I said before, lots of time interacting.
This is true.
So one of the things I would like, for the benefit of all of us, just to hear your perspective, and for Dr. Gushkin to hear also, what has been the journey to the focus that you have now?
It's a very interesting journey.
not so much time involved, but what has been going in your mind as we move from out here into through the delimitation process to focusing on one particular thing. And when you explain that, would you focus in on what you see as the target? You've already alluded to it, but how would you explain it? Very simply.
I still remember it was maybe a year ago or more than a year that I come to you that I said, I want to talk about the Catholic Church. What do you want to talk about? It was very general, very abstract, nothing in particular. So I said, I want to see what is the obstacles that stand on the American people that they don't get involved and they acted in the church. And first I thought about language. And I was going to have my research about language barrier between the two subgroups. But later I find that as I was during this time when we're negotiating what is the research will be about, I was talking with non-Egyptian people. I figured that the Egyptian Americans, they don't have a problem at all with the language because they can pick at least some words. If they don't pick the whole conversation, they can pick some words that join the conversation or helping them follow the liturgy, the prayer. Talking with non-Egyptian at all, either American spouse or converted, for converted Copts, they said, yeah, I know before joining the church that it's ethnic church. Okay, so it's not a problem.
Now, you're talking about language in terms of worship, liturgy.
Liturgy. I was talking about language in terms of worship, and I didn't find a problem. I didn't find a big problem with American Egyptian. I didn't find either it was less for convert Copt. For American spouse, they said, yeah, we'll follow on the screen. And it's okay to have 10-20% in other language, that's fine. So I start to think about language is not the main issue. And unfortunately, what I'm seeing now among the leaders is that they focus on language, not focus on cultural religious practices. And they think language is a problem. And as I mentioned, my perspective is that now the Coptic Church starts to have American Coptic Orthodox Church for second generation and non-Egyptian, and traditional Coptic Church for first generation and whoever wants to join this church. And I'm really scared that this is going to split the Coptic Church, divide it into two different churches. And we have the very strong example from the Russian Church. The Russian Church has now American Orthodox Church, which started from the Russian Church, but later on they split the same way the Coptic Church is going through now. They start to have a church for themselves. Later, they have their own denomination. So language wasn't a big problem, as I have casual conversation with a good number of non-Egyptian. But it still was in my mind to what the reason behind the excellent science that happened in the church. And through the discussion with Dr. Huber and Dr. Sherman, we got to the point that culture, I told them culture, then we said, culture what? What you want to talk about culture? Culture is a big, broad, it's not easy thing to talk about. And we narrowed it down to have it only for the church worship and service. It's not for culture in general. It's a culture related to religious practice. That's something culturally different than other church or other denomination in the worship, in the service. And this was a long journey. It took us several months to get to this point.
And then focusing on Hofstede.
And focus on Hofstede as what's the theory you're going to adapt for this research.
And how did you identify him as the one that worked for
actually, I start with Berry for acculturation. His theory is acculturation strategy, which is assimilation, marginalization. It's 4 items. But I didn't find this theory fits for the American Copts subgroup. It fits the Egyptian Copts subgroup. That how they're going to adapt to the a new culture, a new living here. And also going to take me to the social culture, not to the religion culture. So after reading about his theory and many references, I said, no. And actually, I mentioned this to you. I start with this one, then I start to find half-step culture dimension theory. And actually, in his theory, although he applied on employees, he mentioned the religion part. And this is what got my attention. He mentioned, but he didn't apply it. So it's possible to be applied. Why not? That's why from here, I said half-step theory would be a good fit for, or a good lens fitting, investigating culture dimension, culture religious practices as causing dissonance between Egyptian and American.
I listened to an interview of one Hofstede interviewing the other Hofstede, and he made the point that he wants people to extend what he's been doing.
Oh,
So that's exactly what you've done. You've been taking something that he used fairly broadly. In fact, he said, I claim to be in no field. I claim to spread across the fields. So that's exactly what you've been doing. So that gives you a distinctive, which is what we're after. So what kind of assumptions are underneath? What do you feel you don't have to prove before you start out working toward what you feel you want to determine?
When I start to think about religious practices, there are many, and that's why I choose half-step cultural dimension theory to just give me a framework, give me just 6 dimensions. And through these 6 dimensions, I will go through. But in the religious practices, there are some religious practices related to the dogma of the Coptic Church. And this, when I don't need to prove it. First of all, because there is no non-Egyptian Copts in the Coptic Church doesn't agree on the dogma of the Coptic Church. We do have a catechism classes that presenting the sacraments, presenting the intercession of angels and saints, and all of these beliefs in the Coptic Church. So this point, it's at the door. You take it or you leave. So it's not to negotiate. It's take it or leave it. So any non-Egyptian interested to be a Copt member in the church, he has to agree on this. So this part I'm not touching. It's approved from the American Copt subgroup. They have no problem about this because it was in the very first step in their process through being a member in the Coptic Church. And they are free at this point, even if they are dating Egyptian Copt who going to be married. If he doesn't accept the beliefs of the church, he has the option to take her to his denomination or to just to break up, whatever he wanted. But I mean, it's not our option, it's their option. But he has to show his interest in the dogma. So about this part, I'm not going to discuss in the research. And I'm not going to have it as example in the religious practices. It's not there. Like part of the religious practice is we recite the creed in every liturgy, and actually in every sacrament, the church practice, we recite the creed. I'm not touching this, and it's not for negotiation to be added, to be removed, to be modified. No, it's a creed. This thing is starts long time ago and will be forever. So it's.
Okay, so there's a difference between delimitations and assumptions, but what I hear you saying is after we've delimited and focused on something, there are still areas where this is where I start. This is the assumption I'm making. This is, as you said, there's no debate on the liturgy. It's in or out, that's it. So I build from here and I move outward.
Exactly.
So that helps you as you, what you were doing before as we were interacting was you were out in those fields where do I need to? And once you push those back
Yes,
and say, here's where I go, fine. Okay, now let's move through the chapters, and Dr. Sherman and I have said chapters 1 and 2 seem very clear. So let's just ask some general things if we have questions there. Then we'll concentrate more on chapter 3, where we're trying to give the reader something that could be replicated without needing your help.
Sure.
And we'll probably discuss a little more finally there. You have some things that you would like to.
I wanted to start and say, I feel that in chapter 1, you did a very good job of presenting the topic and the relevant factors. All of, I found it easy to follow and relevant. I guess I would start by saying one of the questions I have is, and maybe it's related to an assumption, but the structure of the church and how you're going to use that even in your research. Can you just talk about the structure of the Coptic Church in terms of the bishops? And,
the Coptic Church has a pope or patriarch, and he is the boss of the Holy Church. No one can do anything without his direction. But also the Coptic Church believes that he doesn't have solo decisions. He has to have the Holy Synod. The Holy Synod consists of the bishops and metropolitans and the bishops all over the world. So, and they have annual meeting. It's always the week before Pentecost. They have annual meeting because around this time of Pentecost, if there any ordination for a new bishop, it happened about this time. So they have the meeting and they all ordain the new bishop. As I said, the Holy Synod is all the metropolitans and the bishops, America, Australia, in Europe, Asia, wherever they are, they all travel and gather in Egypt and have the meeting. Each metropolitan or each bishop, he has a diocese, and he is the boss of the diocese. So any local decision, he doesn't have to go back to the Pope. So the book with the Holy Synod is about to have the main issue for the Coptic Church. Like when we talk about abortion, it's not the bishop and his diocese. It is the Holy Synod together to give a decision for the Coptic Church, where the Coptic Church stands from this point. But when it comes to within the diocese, that should we add another liturgy on Friday night, because usually the liturgy is Sunday morning. How about to have one Friday night for people who work and just leave late from their work? This is a local decision within the
they have freedom to make that decision.
The bishop make it with the priest, not to go back to the Pope or the Holy Synod.
And what about your position? Where are you in all of this?
The priest is the one responsible for the church, and some of the minor decision he can make it himself. Some he has to go back to the bishop to do it. At least with the congregation, he is the one to perform the sacraments, all the 7 sacraments. He is the one to give the sermon most of the time. He is the one to give it every week. He is the one to lead all the committees. Even if he has a coordinator, he has to watch what's going on in the.
So you are a priest of a local congregation. Are you?
You ask about me,
Yes.
personally?
Yes.
No, about all what I said, it's generally speaking. Come to me. Currently, I'm a general priest. And general priest means that I go serve for a community once a month, twice a month, 3 times a month as they need it. And it covers other priests that they traveling or sick or whatever. So I'm not with a particular church now.
Okay.
You are filling in as small churches are developing until they become hire their own priest. Is that correct?
I used to do this for a long time, but at that time, I had my own church.
Okay.
So I had my own church on Sunday and the traveling Saturdays to build up new churches.
So you have the context of seeing not only one
Right.
very well, but you have seen other churches, and so you actually have a platform to speak. After you do all this research, people will actually listen to you.
What do you mean? No, sorry, I didn't get it.
What level of authority are people going to see you?
Mm.
So when you finish all this research and come to some conclusions, who will you share that with, and what difference do you hope to make, and why would they listen to you?
Wisely, I will share it with the leaders, not with the
Which leaders?
congregation.
With which leaders?
First of all, I'm going to travel to Egypt and present it to the Pope.
Okay.
And the Pope has the authority to present it in the Holy Synod annual meeting to all bishops, or for just the bishops serving outside Egypt because they are in touch with this problem. Second, I will present it to the bishops in United States.
Okay.
Because they have semi-annual meeting and I can travel and present it there. I don't want to present it to congregation because it's not wise.
Right.
Maybe the result will be not in favor for the Catholic Church. For the leader, they should concern, not the congregation.
So my point, you have a high level of influence, perhaps, that you can. This is not just going to be a project that is left without any impact. You have an opportunity to really affect some significant change.
I have the privilege that to move this research to be active and be able to consider.
Yeah.
And actually, if the bishop considers the research, yeah, definitely it's going to help the Catholic Church a lot. And I can, in my personal contact with other priests, I can give them just some idea about what the results. So they are leaders also. So through the leaders, the Pope, the bishops, the priests. And as you say, it will be for the benefit of the church. Yes.
Yeah.
Are they aware of you doing that now, or will it be a case of making them aware later?
A small group of the priests, they know that now because they are friends. We talk about that. But when it comes to the questionnaire, I have to call priests of just. Okay, we used to have annual meeting during the life of Pope Shenouda, who passed away 6 years ago. But since then, we don't have annual meeting. So there are priests, I haven't seen them for a long time. But when I call them, I will present the research and the benefit of the research for them.
And how open do you intend to be about your delimitation of sharing within the text?
To who?
In your final report, are you going to show that delimitation of who you will share it with and who you will not?
As I said,
No, I'm asking about your written text in your final report. Because it is
to
not,
give them a copy of the research.
it is no.
What's your
In
question?
other words, you normally have a target audience.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we have indicated that. Do you feel hesitance to do that?
I think those who participate in the questionnaire, I might give them the result of the questionnaire.
No, I'm talking about the final report when it's all done. You said you want to share this with leadership primarily.
Yes, yeah.
Are you going to make that statement in your final text? That is preferably for them.
Oh yeah, I will add this point, yeah.
Okay, because we don't presently have that.
I think in conclusion, I'm going to give my recommendation to the leaders, not to the laymen.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's where you intend to include that
Yes.
type of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, if I go on to chapter 2, or did you have something else from chapter 1?
No, I'm looking through my comments and it's
Okay.
not 1 and 2 we have very much.
Right. So can you just talk briefly about the religious hybrids that you include in chapter 2?
Oh yes, it's very interesting to see that when the parents coming from different denomination and sometimes from different religion, how the kids will be between the two directions. As I said, it's very secured if the two parents are Coptic and attending one church all the time. Very secure for the kids to see one faith presented to them all the time. but it's confusing when you see the kids going here and there and seeing something different than the other place practicing. And this really noticeable in the Coptic Church, that you can see the kids coming from intercultural marriage. They are not belonging and integrating in the church like the other kids coming from two parents from the same faith. And unfortunately, when they become of age, like 18 or 21, they make their own decision, and then high percentages don't continue in the church.
Dr. Gushigan, I think we should include you as we move along because you're becoming acquainted with something and it would be better to ask the questions where they come up.
Yeah, and I'm following as you raise these because I'm looking at this digital prospectus, so it's very interesting.
So feel free to
Okay.
just chime in.
I also very much appreciated the biblical concept section. We are at Lancaster Bible College and Graduate School, so I appreciated that section being in chapter 2 as well.
And it's very interesting to see the Galatian church is exactly what's happening with the Coptic church now. The challenge between two groups, one has the dominance and the power in the church, and the other cannot do anything.
Yeah. And that's part of the power distance discussion. So moving into chapter 3.
Okay, I have a question on chapter 2. If you would move to page 44, if you have yours at hand, the conclusion on page 44 where it starts, this chapter is examined the theory of cultural dimensions. Okay? You there? I have comments attached to the side as we used to communicate because the procedure is that after we're finished today, if there are any upgrades and we don't see much to be done in chapters 1 and 2, probably a little more just detailed clarification in chapter 3.
Okay.
So one of the questions I have there, and you have all those comments for later, is that you are sharing that you have done this, you've done that, you've done the other thing in the chapter. And that is acknowledging, yes, I've checked this off, I've checked that off, checked this off. But the benefit to the reader would be greater if there would be the takeaway from that area, rather than saying, I have explained the theory of cultural dimensions. What is the big point that the reader should carry from that?
Oh, okay.
Okay? And then, for example, how it could be applied to ethnic religious institutions. Is there a little 3 or 4 word or a phrase term that they could carry with them to how it could be applied? In other words, just to make something up, could it be applied in this small area, you know? And so how? A broad term that would characterize that. That way you are doing what we think in webs that go all over the place, but we must speak in strings, one word after another. Well, the best way is to put that over on the trunk of a tree and think how the branches come out and where the leaves, the twigs, and then the leaves. So as you develop that kind of a structure in your writing, your reader is filling that little mental map. And you've seen that many times in the comments. So I think that would apply especially here in your conclusion, because you have a very robust chapter 2. And it's like, oh my, how can I just this down? And when you help them with that type of a conclusion, plus we've been working on getting those leads, a little bit like headlines and then subtitles on the newspaper, same thing, and then it wraps it up here. So I have a number of comments attached there to show you how you can kind of gist that right at the end, because they'll carry those few major points over to chapter 3, where you're going to start telling them, now this is how I'm going to flesh out what I see, but I have to go over here and check if what I think I'm seeing here from others is applying or how it's applying.
Sure.
So you'll be able to follow those comments.
Okay.
And for example, you do pull up some of the terms in your second paragraph, For example, you have the Egyptian Copts subgroup is pushing hard for collectivism. You move down about 4 lines and it says, this means the American subgroup is leaning more toward individualism. Well, right there you have these nice contrasts. And if you put those together in a way that say, well, this happens here, we're seeing it there, in a very concise form, and then add the details below, they grab that up and hang it on their tree.
Okay.
And they can carry it with them. So I think that would be a very good way to finish chapter 2.
Sure.
That would be my primary suggestion for that.
Okay.
Okay, how about chapter 3 for you?
So a couple clarifications. On page 49, where it says range of participants. The first sentence says all Copts in the United States will be eligible for inclusion.
49?
Yes, on page 49.
Oh, okay.
Range of participants. Says all Copts in the United States will be eligible for inclusion. And then in the next paragraph on the next page, says the invited 1,500 participants. Okay, so bridge that for me. How do you get from all to 1,500? Because it seems, I don't know where that.
The range of participants, first of all.
And he's already said it's 18 and above, so it is not all.
Right.
No, it's not everybody, but when I say it's all Copts in the United States, I mean that the research will not be limited to dioceses or for a certain states. It's open to Copts in everywhere.
Okay, so there's probably a better way to phrase that,
Right.
so that it's not confusing.
Okay.
So Copts anywhere in the United States, or something like that.
Except he is also delimiting.
Who meet the criteria,
Right.
then it will be.
And we have to work in that rephrasing, though, otherwise it looks like it's everyone in the universe. And then when you get down further, it's like, whoops, well, you don't because you're under 18 or, you know.
Okay.
So what I
I
understand
just
you to say here,
started broad.
this is
not,
geographical. You're saying in this sentence, you're talking geography, anywhere in the United States.
Oh, yes.
Is that what you mean by, when you say all Copts in the United States? Are you,
It's only United States, first of all.
Yeah, it's in the
Only
United
United
States,
States.
in all the states,
but anywhere in the United States?
anywhere in the United States.
So that phrasing needs to be more clear.
Oh,
For that
okay.
sentence.
But does that work if he's going to immediately delimit?
Well, no, he needs to add, anyone in the United States who meets the criteria is eligible.
Okay. And later I'm talking about the criteria.
But I think what you're trying to say here is that geographically, it's not limited to any state, that anyone in the United States.
Yes. I don't want to limit
So
it
to
a
emphasize the
certain-
geographical part,
Mm.
there maybe 2 separate sentences, but
I can say from geographical standpoint, any Copts live in
Okay.
any state.
from a
So-
geographical point, anyone who meets the criteria in the United States.
Well, I've noted them, you will get them, I mean, you don't have to, remember. I've noted all these, so they're on here, it will
Oh,
come up again.
Okay.
Right, yeah, but that point is well taken.
A few pages later on page 53. Okay, down at the bottom, the 16 interviewees, and it goes into the next page. You have 4 points that you make about these, and the last one says they live in a state that can be reached by the researcher for a face-to-face interview.
Mhm.
Okay, so my question is, does that create a limiting sample based on where you can go? Because what if there are church in Los Angeles, right?
Oh, yes.
But you're not going to go to Los Angeles,
No, practically face-to-face interview.
right? So you are actually limiting the scope of in terms of the interviews. You're not getting the West Coast perspective because they don't live nearby you.
But actually, I made the point that they all have the same cultural practice, they all have the same worship criteria.
This came up before in our interactions, and we talked about that, and his defense was they all have the same liturgy, they have to agree with it.
Yeah, nothing different from here to there.
But you were saying
But
you
how they
will hear
interact.
different responses from those who don't agree, is what you're saying. So you would have to represent, or you would have to declare, and this is what I did in my research. I said, I am finding the perspectives of those in this locale.
Right, so when
Someone
you,
else can extend it elsewhere until it's all covered.
Exactly.
But that has to be clarified. You can't claim to represent what you're not going to represent.
that's my point.
Or you can, if you do it to a locale, or you can do the face-to-face digitally, if he wants to broaden it out.
Well, we talked about
Yeah,
that,
but
and it was so broad. He has so much stuff he's going to deal with here that I think it would be better to say, I am representing this area, whether you say or not that the people here are more conservative or less generally, socioculturally isn't as important since you're focusing on the religious response and behavior. But I still think it's important to represent your choice of that exclusive area.
And then it is a fact is that a geographical location doesn't limit it in the interview at all. I mean, people live in New York, they are the same in Los Angeles as Copts, as I'm talking for the Coptic church. All the practices happen in Texas, happen in New York, happen in Illinois, happen in Los Angeles, they all the same. So that's why I'm not seeing interviewing people from far distant for them or me to travel and fly will not make any difference.
Well, what he's saying though is you will hear different responses from those who do choose to show.
In my email, I will say that, do you live in states 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? If they live in these states, they will reply, yes, we do.
Well,
But is
if
there any difference between someone who lives in Tennessee and someone who lives in Maryland?
What is that?
Is there any difference?
No, there is no difference, but I mean, I can have all of them from Maryland, but as I have the privilege to be located in other states, so why not? It just,
well, I think
But that's
what's-
part of the question. What difference are you, what difference would there
it
be?
doesn't make a difference. I mean, I need 16 people, so I have to open the door a little bit wide. If I just limit it to Maryland, how I'm sure that in Maryland I find 4 from each group.
Well, what I hear going on is this, and we've talked about this before.
Right.
Liturgically, he says you will get the same response
Right.
because they've got to yield or not yield.
Mhm.
What you are saying is behaviorally and emotionally and, affectively, you are going to hear something different, probably, if they're willing to share it, from someone from San Francisco or
So, for
Harrisburg,
example,
Pennsylvania.
How they view power distance would be probably different in the West Coast than in
No,
the middle.
power distance is about the bishop and the priest,
Well, what
and
about?
they all the same. They all the same.
But the person who is sitting in the church, when you ask them a question about how they feel about the leadership, do you think it will be no difference?
The difference will be personal.
Yes, but I think part of that personal difference may be related to the culture of where they live.
That's why I'm saying that I can be located in different states to have different bishops and different beliefs.
But not all the geography.
I cannot have all
Right.
of them.
That's
why.
that's my point. That's my point.
Uh-huh.
I have no problem with that,
Mhm.
but I think you need to mention it, that you're only, when you say in that fourth one, live in a state that can be reached by the researcher for a face-to-face interview, you have by that statement created a smaller group or a limiting factor. It may not be significant, but I think it probably needs to be mentioned anyway.
And I think it needs to be developed that his choice of locale is going to not influence maybe the liturgical responses,
Yeah,
but it
I
will
see this
affect
point.
it.
Yeah.
And that you are representing this locale, this geopolitical area that may indicate differences. It could be otherwise, but that is going into other research for later.
Related to your point, then, I think for the credibility of the research, the sentence after D should probably be eliminated. Because,
Where are you at now?
same page.
Yeah, because
page
they're in a
53, it says, because the uniformity of the liturgy and all religious practices, it does not matter in which the state the interview lives. I think having that in print would raise a red flag to anyone reading it.
Yeah.
But maybe an option too would be, if you take that out, you're simply having a statement of convenience.
Right.
Right.
And that's fine, but then when you're done in chapter 5, if you do further research, a statement that says face-to-face interviews in different parts of the country might yield different results, therefore someone else should do that particular
But are you
research.
suggesting that he not recognize reflecting the attitudes of an area here? You mean holding that off for 5 would be better? And just
I think
use
it
the
can,
convenience
my
component
opinion,
here?
from my limited view, so granted, so I qualify myself. But I agree that that sentence would raise a red flag because it makes it's a strong assumption that there is no difference when there probably is a difference. And so, but in chapter 4, you can make the statement such as, these findings are reflective of this locale,
These locations.
these locations, but may or may not be generalizable to
Right,
a
but what
broader
are you saying
business.
should be extracted here? I'm,
The sentence after
the sentence
The form
after question.
After point D.
oh, okay, yes, yes, yeah, I agree with you.
Because that's
Right.
that's a strong assumption which may or may not be true.
Well, this has
But
been a point of discussion among us.
But if you remove,
Before, yeah.
if he removes that, and then make
Mhm.
the statement in chapter 4 of this is reflective of this locale and may or may not be generalizable, and then add further research, it should be fine.
And in chapter 4, I will have the data already, so I can say people live in Delaware have the same reflection like people live in Tennessee or
Right.
whatever.
And because that's within your purview. But what for those in Los Angeles or Chicago, then I like in chapter 5 saying that further research may or may not yield different results.
Yeah, well, you can only represent from the data you have. You can't
Right.
generalize it anywhere else, so you don't want to claim that, you know, okay.
Okay. How did you come up with the questions related to Hofstede, the 6 dimensions?
I looked at Wayne's dissertation, which is quite different. He's not adapting Hofstede dimension theory. He's adapting because Hofstede is about the organization, but there is another theory about which is VS scale about the individuals in the organization. And Wayne, the Vietnamese researcher, in his church, he adapted the other theory, but he just gave me the idea that I can take from secular questions about embryoes and I can get something can be for a church.
So let's look at one example on page 52. Toward the bottom of the page, the table, and Q7, question 17.
Okay.
So this is under the category of 4 non-sequential questions about the uncertainty avoidance dimension. Okay, so we're looking at questions that help with uncertainty avoidance. So question 17, all in all, how would you describe your spiritual life according to what the Coptic Church offers you? Tell me how that relates to uncertainty avoidance.
If the Coptic Church, based on what she offers to the Coptic members, is 100% source of growth in their spiritual life, then they are leaning to be under objective, religious objectives, which takes them to be
avoidant of uncertainty.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
If not, if the answer is very poor, it means that no, I'm not into this. I'm into surface. I'm into subjective.
So my question is, I'm just trying to get behind how each of these questions connects.
Oh yes, yeah.
And then
They are not direct questions.
in this question in particular, how would you describe your spiritual life? Very good, good, fair, poor, very poor. There are some of these questions that I'm wondering, are those the right options? Or could it be strong, or very strong, or I don't know if there's other options. This is a minor question, but just one that I noticed, like, will they understand this question as it's intended to be understood?
You're saying, will they interpret those choice words the same way as he is?
Right.
And that is a very valid point. We talked about that. What does good mean to you? What does good mean to them? So if there's a word which is more definitive, that gives an immediate response, that will get closer to what you're after. And to the point about uncertainty, one of the things that he mentions in chapter 2, and I don't think it's made a strong point of, but it needs to be in 4 when you reflect back on here, is that uncertainty does not mean as what we think of it so often. It's the risk factor, you know.
Right.
It isn't the unpredictability, it's the risk factor that matters, because that leads to fear. So that has to be made a little bit stronger in some of these choices. If you're looking at, are they the ones that give me the certainty and the foundation and the security, or is it a fear-inducing thing? So a word that's a little closer there and triggers that kind of response may help.
Cool.
And then in 4, when you take your data and tie it back to 2, you need to make it clear there then what's going on. Yeah.
So another example on page 56, at the top of the page, you're going through the 6 dimensions, and under long and short-term orientation,
Oh, yeah.
so the question is, how would you wish to see your church's mission and vision statement applied in practice? My question was, how many of these people will know the church's mission and vision statement?
That's why I said you wish. I'm not talking about the one existing. What's the one you wish? And this will take me, actually the first answer will be, I don't know if, I'm not sure if the church has a
Okay, all right.
So it's going to be, okay, in your imagination, in your wishing, how is it to be? And this will take me to the point that, first of all, if the church doesn't have a vision or mission statement, that it means it's short term.
Okay.
And second, it's what the people wishing to have it in the church.
Okay, good. That's very helpful to hear you say that. So you do understand. Okay, that feels good.
I will not be surprised to have some churches don't have any vision
or that the people don't know.
Or people don't know about it. Yes.
Well, those are things you pick up in chapter 4 and indicate he was really using a lure term there to see what happens when it doesn't result. He draws his conclusions.
Exactly.
How will you use the demographic information to help you to determine the pool of interviewees?
First of all, I will not use the demographic and questionnaire for the interviewees because I'm giving them the option to email me.
Okay.
So whoever answers the questionnaire and interested will email me. But it will help me in the statistical data to see, for example, as you're saying, people live in Los Angeles may be different than people live in New York. I have the demographic that says he belongs to the diocese.
Each of the dioceses.
These belong to, exactly. This will help me to give me flashlight. Is something going here different than people live in other dioceses, or how is it? It might be a big point later to just have it in my conclusion that I couldn't interview people from other places, but the statistics says that people there have different opinion than people here. So.
We talked about this last time we were together, but can you just briefly share what's the process of choosing the 16 interviewees?
The process is they will email me their interests. I will email them the criteria.
Okay, but even how do you get to that point? Because they have to agree to do the interview.
Oh yeah, the first thing is they agree on the consent form and they email me with their interests. As they are emailing me, I have my email. I have their emails, emailing them back with the criteria. Whoever meets the criteria will email me according to the emails with their phone contact. I will give them personal calls, each one meeting the criteria, explaining everything. They are agree, happy with that. I will check these names that after the phone call they are interested to continue in interview. Say I got 57 participants. I will take these 57s. Maybe I will have 7 Egyptian American. I have 17 American spouse. I have 13.
You have the 4 groups.
I have 4 groups, yeah. And
the one is the one subgroup, and then 3 in the other subgroup.
3 categories in one American a couple subgroup. And then whatever the number in each of these 4, I will take the number and through as you guide me to random.org, I will have the 7 or 13 or whatever the number, and you get randomly 4. Oh, yes.
Well, we talked before about using pilot interviews.
This will happen. This is a process to get to the people for interview.
Are you going to pull pilots, like 1 out of each of the 4?
Yes, I will.
You cannot use the data, so you don't want to say you have 16 interviewees. You have 4 pilot and 12 interviewees.
Is it 4 and 12 or 4 and 16?
Oh, yeah.
Well, you are going to be
too many,
swimming
right?
in data for that.
Too many, 16,
That's
too
the
many.
4,
You're
right?
going to be in the retirement home before you start. Because you have to deal with their quantitative data first.
On the transcribing.
Yeah, and then all the coding and everything else. So if you were to pull 4 of those, then they should not be labeled as interviewees. They should be labeled as that, and then that has to be clarified in the process.
Because you're learning about the interview process with those pilot interviews.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you find out that they look at you blank and you get nowhere, and so you go back and change. You know, that doesn't make a difference here. That's reflected in what
How are you continuing in the interview
you'll
process?
indicate that in chapter 4. Yeah. Okay, so I think you have to differentiate in your explanation of who is pilot and who is not, how you get them. So if you get to your 4 groups, you can pull 4 out for pilots. But you don't include
One
them
from
as
each group.
interviews. Yeah, one
I
from each
was
group.
thinking, like Dr. Sherman, that it will be 16.
So the only caveat I would say to that is if generally after, let's say after 2, there's a couple ways you could go. After 2 pilots, if it's working.
Well, he wants one from each of the 4 groups because they're, you know.
Different
But
perspective.
then the approach you could do is if the 4 pilots, because this happens sometimes, if the 4 pilots worked well and you did not have to
Make any changes.
make major changes, you state that and then include that because you didn't have to make changes and the interview protocol is the same for all 16 then, because you just made some tweaks, which happens no matter what. But if they're not significant, he could roll in the 4, but he'd have to state it. I started with the pilot, they worked great, small changes, therefore the researcher made a decision to include those in the 16.
But if there are differences, is 12 enough?
Well, I'm afraid dealing with all the data he has, he better not go
Yeah,
bigger
too
than
much.
that. Now, I know everybody.
So 4 plus
agrees
12 is
more, but
okay,
You're not gonna
if
get
you do
much
the 4
depth.
pilots.
Oh, yeah.
4 pilots and 12 others, unless there's no difference, then you have 16,
Okay.
including the 4 pilots.
If there's major differences,
Then you have to fill the 12.
It's the 12.
Do you think, Dr. Huber, with the software and all the facilities, it's not going to be easier?
Possibly.
Yeah.
I don't know,
Very
but you
cool,
still,
yeah.
I mean, you can't just lean on the artificial intelligence, you still have to do some, it does it, speeds it up, but you gotta do some good overview.
Especially since English is not your first language.
Right.
Yeah, true.
I do have to do some differentiation. Okay, what else do you have in
Okay.
chapter 3? Okay, my questions on chapter 3, and I don't think we have to hassle through them here. They're primarily, we just agreed on this. He would look at the overview and how the response of the reader and, you know, impressions. And I have all these things marked down. For example, on page 49, where we start the quantitative design and the whole way through, we struggled with this and revamped chapter 2 when we wrote it the first time. How do we lay out quantitative and then qualitative and still show them connecting and all that? One of the things I find a little hard to follow if I had to replicate yours, and I have it written alongside it on my comments, you start talking about all these acronyms and this and that and the other thing, and it's, I have no idea where am I going? So a lot of my comments are, get a link to that point where they can go look at that. And when you say, I will adapt questions from there to this, they have the 2 points that I can see it here, I can see it there, I can see the changes he's made to move it from one to the other. And so I follow down through there saying, get these instruments lined up in a clear, explained manner that show that when you're going to Hofstede's 2013 version, and I have things in there like, no, that's not him. He started in 1960. That's someone doing a 2013 version of his. And so just a couple words, and I suggest how to do that, will ease that explanation to the reader that they're seeing an adaptation of an adaptation of an adaptation.
But those are the notes on that you have on the document that
I have those all in the comments here, but I'm just saying, what I'm working through in chapter 3, and I don't think it's to our benefit to go line by line here, is basically saying you've got all the pieces here, but the poor reader who would try to replicate it would say, oh, I have the piles, and I have them in colors, but I have no frame. So I'm saying, be a little more specific, give them links, let them see the steps. You're writing a recipe with a lot of text in between. So I've done that through, all the way through. And for example, where you drop in something about a pilot here, and then a pilot there, and a pilot there, I'll say a general statement here, and when you refer to it again, just a word that takes them back. That's what I do through chapter 3.
Okay. And by the way, I will have also pilots for the questionnaire.
Yeah, well,
have,
and I'm
yeah,
saying,
I have
a lot of
too.
places you don't have it marked as your questionnaire, so I have marked there, get that, go back to chapter, appendix C. It's forgotten a lot of places, so I picked that up. Okay, and then at the end, you do not have a conclusion on the end.
of chapter 3.
Right, it kind of just drops. And there again, you need to do the very same thing as you did in 2. They should be able to go away with a couple headlines in their mind that they can hang on their tree somewhere. And I have that mentioned. So that every place you wind up, you give them a little gist, so that gets them ready for the next one. I would feel, rather than just going through line by line by line, I think that will work itself out and you'll be okay, but you need to concentrate on 3.
Okay.
And then when that's clear, you just.
Chapters 1 and 2 are really good.
Yeah.
Chapter 3 is well underway.
Yes, all the pieces are there. We just need a little bit more hand-holding, clarity, a little more detail at a couple of points and some of the correctives they mentioned. Okay. Anything that you would like to ask?
I actually have a question on page 54. Thank you, Elaine, for giving me an opportunity. And my question might reflect more my, some of my ignorance with the overall project. But you say, per sentence, each Coptic member selected will need to meet some of the following criteria. My concern is the word some, because it seems to, it might create a problem for replication. It might create a problem for validity, data validity.
Well, my comment here was, what about location?
Location.
That was one that was not mentioned at all.
So I'm wondering, I guess my question, do you think that might be a problem in terms of data collection, but replication is the word some? Might it be better to say they need to meet these criteria as opposed to some of these criteria?
Yeah,
in the beginning, I said all these criteria, but then I changed it to some because, as I'm saying, I don't know how many one will respond, and I don't know if I will have the luxury to meet all the criteria or some of them. So, and I don't want to limit my interviews and stuck where I didn't find people have all the criteria.
Well, why not be less specific in all criteria with a little bit of option along the side? I would think is that safe?
What do you mean?
In other words, you don't have to mention every little detail that you'd like to see. Ones that you will not accept unless they have to be there.
Right. For instance, I personally like that better. If you were to, for instance, say, because my second question related to that was, why is E a criteria related to your research study? How does that help your research study?
Because people that they do have children and their children left the church, the people got hurt from the church, and the people they have life experience about it. It's applied cultural religious practices that led their children to leave the church. So to me, I meet parents with experience is better than meet parents they don't have experience.
And related to yours, this is just a thought. Could you do keep A through C and say meet these criteria, but then question D and E you put in a demographic survey, so you can still collect that information.
Right,
yeah. So
I do have it in demographic survey, but the point that I will not have access to the participants, the questionnaire participants' emails. I don't want to have this because of privacy and all of this stuff. So they will email me. I don't know who will email me. Maybe they have children, maybe they don't. So that's why if, for example, if only 4 Egyptian Copts subgroup emailed me, so I don't have random in first place, they only have 4. And if they 4, they don't have children that left the church. I will not
by adding these criteria, you're also saying they must be at least 35, 40 years old in order, if they're going to have children who are 18 years of older.
Who have left the church.
Yeah.
What if they don't have children?
Because a 2-year-old doesn't leave the church, right? 16-year-old. That was just my, I mean, in terms of validity, I think maybe, maybe preserving the top 3 and making sure they all meet the criteria will help you long term. But you're the committee, so I just raised a question.
Well,
so
no,
I'll
I
leave
think
that up to
that's
you.
valid because I flagged that too, and then said, if you're going to limit what's going on here, and I figured we'd talk about it. So I think you'd be wiser limiting.
If you remember in the older copy, at point D, I said, and I ended with and/or number D. So I give myself the option to
so
have.
It's probably just a better way of notating, because the or at the end of D,
Just.
it becomes confusing.
That's what you said, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. So there's just probably a better way, and I'd like maybe keep the first 3, but then have additionally the following 2, or one or both of the following 2 would be desirable.
Yeah, that would be better.
Mm-hmm. That would be a good idea.
Because your criteria is the top 3, which allows you to have a larger potential sample. Especially when you're aiming for 367 or 86, you had something like 380. I think that'd be better.
Yeah, that sounds good, because that way you have a little more.
Okay.
Yeah. And
I divide them.
Plus the word or would be more easily understood between those 2, rather than confused with the other 3 above.
so the whole way through chapter 3, when you get to the instruments, there's kind of some of these questions that I have a lot of comments here. Work through them.
You're not surprised by that?
No, you're used to that now.
I get used to that.
But I can't talk to them, so I have to do it. Yeah. So let's work through that. If you have questions, just please ask, because when you're done with this goes in and you go out, and we don't want you confused out there. Do pay attention, we'll take time now, do pay attention to some comments on the consent form. Did anyone else feel that it's plenty wordy and not kind of graphically easy to follow?
Yeah, there's a lot to it.
Yeah, and so check that out. I will communicate with you on that, maybe communicate with him on that. Because when you walk up to something, you want to see, where do I go? What do I do? And they have to read through all kinds of text to
It's like
get to.
the end user things on every website, who actually
Yeah.
reads the whole thing.
Well, you want to know, right? I mean, I think I'm saying that because my daughter has now, she's been a graphic designer for years
Okay.
that can match text to, I mean, illustrations to text. She says, thanks, Mom. You know, because she's learned how to do it, because most of them can't. But she's now doing usability design, which is when you open something up, do you know where you're going?
Right.
You know, so I have some of that baked into here. Okay, I think that's enough for what we need now.
Okay.
So we will just adjourn here unless you have further questions. We have comments that will come through here. And
You
we
did a very
need
good
to-
job of preparing. Well done today.
Yes. We need to ask you to just step outside
Sure.
while we have consideration.
Okay.
Well, Father George, we'd like to congratulate
Oh,
you
thank
and say you are ready to go to the field after you make
Oh,
some.
yeah, you're right. You're right.
After you make the revisions that we have suggested, so we will communicate
Sure, sure.
back and forth
Thank
until
you.
that's done, and then we will be
Thanks a lot.
ready to
Thanks so
have
much.
you get out where you can
Thanks a lot for your
move
help.
forward.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I will go home and just do a little cleanup on a couple comments and then send you these.
Okay.
You can do the cleanup, pay special attention to chapter 3,
Mhm.
and when that's clear and clean, then we will take that and look at the IRB, make sure we have the right one and it's filled out with the detail. We were discussing among ourselves
Mhm.
all the details that need to be in there so we are clear.
Okay.
So you and I will be communicating. He will be going on sabbatical. He's going to be busy for the summer.
I'm gonna leave for vacation for a couple weeks.
That's nice.
So we want to get you ready to go.
Agreed.
So the
Thank you
chapter,
so much.
so the revisions need to be made,
Yes.
and the IRB, all that needs to be done before you start.
Applying for
So I will communicate with you as
Mhm.
rapidly as you can communicate back. If you want to do some and send it while you're working on others, that's fine.
Okay.
As soon as that's clean, we will get the IRB and then we'll send it in and they will be reviewed.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
So you know, if I have it by any time by the 24th, midnight on the 24th, I should be able to turn around the IRB before I leave. But I would need it by that
We
day.
would like
so
to go in the
That gives
fast
you
track
10
and
days.
get you out.
Yeah,
Thanks
yeah,
for
that's good time.
revisions and
Yeah.
IRB.
So I will see you get those
You will be
tonight or
available,
tomorrow at
right?
the very latest, early in the morning, maybe
I
past
will reply
midnight.
tomorrow for you. Yes, I will reply tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
congratulations.
Thanks.
Can we go ahead and pray for him?
Yes. And I was just going to say, and now let's have a prayer of dedication for him.
Thank you, Father, for what you're doing here. Thank you for Father George and what you've done in him and through him these many years. I pray that you would use this project for your purposes and your glory and the edification of the Coptic Church here in the U.S. Pray that you would guide his revisions and his thinking, that all will be done in a timely manner, but also to be done very well. I pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.